What is up, everybody? Ed Gow Jr. here of the Dad Central Show. And my partner in show and in crime is right beside me. Hey, Drew, what's going on?
Hi, Ed. Well, as usual, I'm looking forward to another great conversation. The difference is I'm actually a little bit nervous this time because our guest is someone I've been listening to for a long time, and he's doing amazing work in the dad space. So I'm nervous. That's okay, though.
Don't be nervous. Be excited.
I always say I'm excited. So I'm going to go nervous today, but I'm sure it's going to be a great conversation.
Okay. Hey, don't worry. We got your back. So before we go any further, let's talk about the Dad Central Show. It's sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes care is the best of a man because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. So, Drew, are you so nervous you can't introduce our new friend?
No, I'm not that nervous. But
Okay.
Before I do introduce him, I do want to just let listeners out there know that we love hearing from you. Because we want to bring content that is valuable, that you're going to be able to take away, and as our subtitle is, tools that help you raise confident, successful kids. And so I just want to share a little bit of feedback I have received from a dad who listens to the show, because I said, hey, what are you struggling with? Where can we help you? And so there's 3 things that he shared that I just want to put out there. And if you're a dad who's struggling with it, let us know. And we'll find guests who can talk specifically about this, because that's our goal, is to really help you. And so he talks about learning to control his short fuse with his kids at times. Also talks about being able to turn off from work. You know, his job has him on call 6 days a week, and being able to focus on family when he's with them is a real challenge for him. The other thing he says is being able to find time with his wife. With 3 young kids, it's hard. So I want you to know, if you're listening, email us, podcast@dadcentral.ca, so we can build content that's going to help you wherever you're struggling. So to introduce our guest today, though, he's actually got 4 young children as well. I think we just heard one of them before we started. 1-year-old is the youngest, so we'll hear more. But Jerrad Lopes, he's a Christian author, speaker, and he's the founder of dadtired.com, which is a nonprofit ministry. It's focused on equipping men to lead their family well, which is exactly what we're here about at Dad Central. So he hosts a weekly Dad Tired podcast, which, this is great numbers, been listened to over 4 million times by men from around the world. And so he and his wife, Layla, have just moved across the country. They now live in South Carolina with 4 children. And personally, as I said, I've been listening to his show since about 2018. So this is an honor to be able to have him on the show and hear from him directly. So love to have Jerrad come on, and let's start talking fatherhood.
Yeah, man. Well, as that introduction was happening, my 3-year-old just walked in to have a tea party with me, and I can hear. So,
well, that's the reality of dad life.
Yeah, man. Yeah, living it out as literally as we speak.
Wonderful. So look, thank you for taking the time. And again, moving across the country, 4 kids, wife. So we really appreciate you taking the time, because I know time is the most valuable thing you have, especially as a dad.
Yeah. Well, no, it's an honor to be here, man. I mean, when we're talking about like dad stuff, that there's a lot of stuff we could be talking about, but sports and all the kinds of, politics or whatever, but dad stuff is like the sweet spot for me. So I'm happy to be here to talk about that stuff.
Excellent. Well, Drew, let's kick it off.
Okay. Well, we love to find a little bit more about the backstory, right? And so really like to hear about you, what life was like growing up for you. And of course, if you could talk a little bit about the relationship with your father, if it holds any type of significance for you.
Yeah, man. It's always it's always hard for me to talk about my dad in a sense, because my childhood was so different than where we're currently at now. So I try to be really respectful of like our current relationship without our while still being totally truthful about my childhood. So my mom raised me. My dad bailed when I was 3. So I grew up in California, really poor neighborhood, really rough neighborhood. And my mom was working a bunch of jobs to just try to put food on the table, raise me and my 3 sisters. I was the youngest. So I was the only boy and I was the youngest. And my dad bailed when I was 3. So in many ways, I felt like I was on my own. My mom was always working. She's a wonderful mom, taught me a ton, but she just was busy because she was just trying to like pay the bills. And so she was gone a lot, and I was just like doing my own thing. And I would say, to answer kind of the second part of that question, if it holds any significance to you, I would have said my whole life, like my dad's absence didn't really affect me. It's like, yeah, you know, it was so normal to me. And it was actually normal for a lot of my friends. Like we just there weren't a lot of dads around. And so it was just like, yeah, my dad wasn't there. It didn't really impact me. And I remember people trying to ask me that question because they knew it probably had an impact on me. Like, hey, how's your dad not being there? How's that impacted you? And I'm like, it didn't. He wasn't there. You know, how could it have impacted me? And it wasn't until I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s that it really started to like hit me like, oh, dang, I think that my dad not being around actually shaped me way more than I've ever given credit for.
I just want to go a little bit deeper, and thank you for sharing that part of your journey. Were there some things that sort of brought that to your light?
Yeah.
Any sort of events that you can remember that saying, you know what, this has had an impact on me?
Yes. Well, so I think my game plan as I started getting into like young adulthood was to be a good dad and to be a good husband. I didn't have a dad around, so I knew like I was excited to be a dad. And my focus was, I want to be the dad that I always wanted to have. So I remember really specific memories of playing basketball in the driveway alone and picturing my dad sitting there coaching me. Every time I say that, man, like I feel like I have to fight back tears, even right now as I say that, mainly because I think about my son. And I think about if that were his reality, it's just heartbreaking. And I know there are a ton of boys right now who don't have dads around, and they're doing that. They're wishing their dad was there. But that was my story. So I remember playing basketball, my son, and wishing my dad were there, and he wasn't. And so I always thought like I want to be the kind of dad that I longed to have as a boy. And then I became a dad, and I got married, and we started to have kids. And I remember thinking too, like I'm going to be the husband that I knew my mom always wanted or needed in her life. And I was so motivated. Like I was so motivated to be the best dad imaginable. And then all of a sudden I found myself really quickly into marriage and really quickly into my dad journey and my fatherhood journey. And I'm like, I'm not nearly as good at this as I thought I was going to be. I would like blow up at my kids, or I was frustrated with them, or I didn't feel like I was being that good of a husband or intentional. And I'm like, I'm failing at this in many ways. And there was actually, I'm giving you kind of like the short version, but there was a season, I say season a lot because there's just different parts of life, you know, like they come and go. But there was a season of my life where our marriage was like failing. I was a really disengaged husband, super, super selfish. I got married having an idea of what I thought marriage should be like. It wasn't turning out to be the way I thought it should be like. I wanted all my needs met, wasn't thinking through my wife's needs. And we were like legitimately thinking about divorce, who's going to take the kids, what would custody battles look like, that kind of thing. And I decided, it was at that point, my son was 3 years old. And that's the time my dad bailed on me. And so it was like this weird emotional, you know, I'm like, dude, what am I going to do to him? What I know has caused so much pain for me. And that's really when I started to like, oh geez, that like all the childhood feelings that I had just bubbled up right to the surface. All those times where I said it didn't really affect me, like I could tell I had been burying it, and it just all plopped up. And I remember thinking like, I have no desire to go to counseling. My theory on counseling is like, why do I want to pay somebody to tell me I suck when I already know I suck? You know, like those were my 2 cents on counseling. So I'm like, I don't want to do this, but I really had to swallow my pride because I'm like, I can't figure this out myself. I'm not doing a very good job. I've tried and I'm not doing good. So I just swallowed my pride, went to a counselor. And one of the first things the counselor said was, how do you think your father's absence affected you? And again, I was upset because I was like, he wasn't even there. What do you mean it impacted me? And they went on for the next several weeks to basically unpack, to make direct connections to here's your dad's absence, and here's how that's been playing out in your life. And that's when it really hit me to answer your question just directly is like,
that's fantastic. It's one of my mentors when it comes to this helping fathers said that every father has a father. The question is, where is that father?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So thank you for being so open, because I know it can be still challenging at times.
Yeah, for sure. But and kind of the way I started to answer that question though is what's crazy, man, is my dad happened to call me while I was when I was in the middle of that counseling. I talked to my dad maybe once a year from the time I was 3. It wasn't like hostile, but we weren't like close by any stretch of the imagination. He calls me when I'm in the midst of all this stuff and says, "Hey, I'm coming up." I lived in Oregon at the time. He was in California. He said, "I'm coming up with my new wife." I didn't even know he's married. He said, "I'm coming up with my new wife and we'd love to have dinner with you." And I was like, sure. I'm like about to get divorced, So I'm in the counseling and all this stuff. So he comes up, I take him to this really nice dinner, or this restaurant, you can oversee the whole city of Portland. And it was a really fancy place. And we're sitting there and he dives into some small talk thing. How are the kids? And he didn't know I'm like carrying around this like heavy bag of baggage. And I just tell him, I'm like, "Dad, I'm really struggling right now in my life. And I'm really struggling with the idea of how you left me." I said, "I'm not mad at you and I forgive you, but I just need to know what was in your head when you decided to leave, because I'm going through similar stuff and I can't imagine leaving my 3-year-old son right now. Like I just can't even fathom leaving him. So I just need to know where your head was at." And I start weeping as I ask him this question. And man, he owned it as a man, made no excuses, didn't dodge away from it, just like sat in all the uncomfortable, awkward stuff in the middle of a restaurant as I'm crying. I blindsided him and he owned it. And he said, "I apologize." Like he apologized and he said, "It's the biggest regret of my life. I think about it every single day." And I don't think he couldn't have ever brought that up, but me bringing it up was like the doorway for him to address it and say he was sorry. And since then we talk every week. And so it's been really, really cool, but man, yeah, so that was a really healing moment for me, but it's huge different context from when I was a child to where I'm at today.
Drew, I'll bring it back to you, but I just say, if we stopped right there, I'm good. Just there, that message for fathers and men right there, more men and fathers need to hear that story. Drew, I'll give it back to you, but thank you. Just there, I'm my heart is full already.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you, Jerrad. Hearing you share the first part of that story and kind of what you were going through as a young dad, and when you had to go into that stuff in the past, it sounds so much like what I experienced. And so it's very powerful to hear another man, another father share about those challenges, feeling like you're failing, but having this desire to be the best that you can be. And that's exactly how I started Connected Dads, which was my coaching and my belief that I needed to connect with other dads to be the best that I could be, to show up at my best for the people who matter the most, which was my family, mattered the most to me. And so I really connect and resonate with your story from that perspective. To Ed's point, that message is one that I think dads everywhere need to hear, no matter what age or stage, is to be able to take ownership of what they've done, and then be willing to take the next steps to be able to make it right or to move forward in a more positive way. So thanks so much for sharing that, Jerrad. I want to know more about the aftermath. Obviously, you're now connected to your dad, you're talking, but what did that do for you when you heard your dad own it?
What's interesting, man, is I imagined that it would be more healing than it really was, if I'm totally honest. I thought it would be a switch to hear my dad say, "I'm sorry. I love you. I've always loved you." I thought that would like heal a lifetime of wounds, and it didn't. And so I think there's just good expectation for somebody. Like if they're longing to have that kind of reconciliation with their dad or maybe son, if they're an older dad and need to do that with their son, and you think, okay, I'm just going to do it, and there's going to be a switch. I guess maybe a close analogy would be when there's a fight with your spouse and you say you're sorry, you kind of hope that it would just all go away. And it doesn't. There's still work to be done. And I see this actually a lot in men. Men will finally confess something, or they'll own up to something, or they'll say, "I'm sorry" for something. And it took them a ton of courage to do that. And their wife doesn't heal right away. They need to process it for a long time. And husbands, I've seen a lot of times get upset because, like, "I said I'm sorry." I said I'll never do it again. I said it like I'm, why do you keep bringing it up? And that's just because healing takes time. And I learned that. Healing takes time. And so that was step one. I thought it would just be like a one and done, but I learned that this is that was step one of what would be years of us reconciling our relationships with each other, which I still think we're in the middle of, but it's way better than where we were before. And so, yeah, man, it was different than I expected it to. And I host a podcast and I write books from a faith-based perspective. And so what my personal feeling is, and this may not relate to everyone, but I realized in that moment, I needed more than just my dad. I needed something even bigger than just my dad's forgiveness. So for me, I found healing in God and like bigger things, because dad alone wasn't able to fill that gap. And that was a big thing, big realization for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very powerful. Really, thanks for sharing that. Maybe I could stay on this. Ned, is there anything you want to pick up on from this, or?
Just one other conversation piece. Who has helped you become the father? You're not there yet, but you're certainly not where you were. So who are some of the people that have helped your journey along the way? Because I believe in having many fathers.
Mm-hmm.
So who are some of the other fathers that have helped you with your journey and making the turn?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've had a bunch of guys in my life from probably young man, early 18, 19, 20 on, who I admire, I had one guy in particular really take me under his wing. I didn't even know he was doing it. Like, I was brand new husband, brand new dad. And he just started to he was a boss technically, but I think he saw himself as a mentor. And he just literally didn't know. I'm like at his house all the time. I'm at lunch with him all the time. In hindsight, I'm like, he made so many sacrifices to spend time with me when he was doing he was like running his own thing. He's got his own family, his own kids, and how much time he poured himself into me just to have conversations, ask hard, good questions. So he was a huge shape. He really shaped my thinking. But man, if I'm honest, my wife has helped. And I know so many guys can relate to this, but my wife has helped me become a better man and a more mature man. I always, how they say most guys don't develop their brains don't fully develop till they're like 25, I don't think mine was till 30, honestly. And even then I'm still like, I don't even know. I don't think I've fully hit yet, but there was a switch for me at 30. I looked at me in my 20s and I still was really selfish and immature and didn't even have the capacity, it felt like sometimes, to be self-aware of what I was doing and how I was hurting people and how selfish I was being. And so my wife has been so gracious. She could have bailed so many times, man. She could have, and she probably should have bailed in many perspectives so many times, but she was gracious. And that kind of grace has given me the space to learn how to be a man and to mature.
Well, bless you for marrying up.
Yeah, way up, dude.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. That's so important, though.
Yeah, and I always say especially to men, remember to give yourself grace.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Drew, I know we got to move on. We could spend all conversation on this one, but Drew, definitely move on.
Well, yeah, let's talk a little bit about it. We see it in the back. Dad Tired. Is grown. We talked about over 4 million downloads across the world. And so can you talk a little bit about how Dad Tired even got started? And then, did you have a goal, or did it just kind of organically grow? And just talk to us about that, how it evolved.
Yeah, man, no goal, no agenda. It started in the middle of that season of that really hard stuff, when I thought we were going to get a divorce. And what happened was I started going to counseling. I made the decision, I'm not going to bail. I'm going to stick around. I'm going to have hard conversations with my wife. I'm going to try to figure this thing out. And so I happened to write a blog about that, basically just saying that in a little bit of fancier way. I feel like I suck as a husband and dad, but I don't want to. I want to stick around. I got to make this thing work. So I wrote a blog about that, put it on Facebook. I wasn't a blogger. Nobody read anything I wrote, I didn't have a blog. I just happened to write this thing. It was really just a way for me to kind of get off my chest what I was feeling. And I put it on Facebook, which was a very millennial thing of me to do. let me share with the world. I'm at the high end of millennial, but let me share with the world what I'm feeling. So I don't always recommend people do that, but I did that, and all these mommy blogs picked it up. One huge mommy blog in particular shared it with their audience. And then it just went nuts. Like all these people started reading it and sharing it and reaching out. And I knew nothing about that world. I was like, what is happening? And all these guys started to message me on Facebook in particular and said, hey man, I relate. Like, I feel like I suck as a husband and dad, but I don't want to. Like, I want to get this thing right. And so I literally just started to channel those guys into a group on Facebook, a closed group, so we could talk to each other. Because I'm like, we probably could use each other's encouragement. So I started to do that. And Facebook said, what do you want to call the group? And almost as a joke, it was just like Dad Tired, And so that's how Dad Tired started. Literally had no plans of starting anything. And then those guys, as I was posting more, those guys were like, hey, you should start a podcast. This was 7 years ago. Podcasts were like still really new. Not many people were listening to them. I just took my phone and my headphones and just started like recording raw emotions on the podcast, put it on iTunes. And at that time, there were no real things for dads back then. There was nothing, there were no podcasts for dads. And so iTunes ended up featuring it. And then it just like, it took off. I always say like I got tricked. I believe in God. I feel like God tricked me into this, like I had no desire to do any of this stuff. So the fact that I'm doing it full time now is just insane to me.
What was the first podcast? Remember that memory?
Oh man. I don't know what the first one was. All of them were just me in my living room or my bedroom, just whatever I was feeling that day. Like, did this today, failed here, yelled at my kids today. And then just would try to be self-aware enough to be like, how do I fix that? How do I not do that? Or why did I do it? And so, yeah, those early days were just really, really raw. No editing, just like throw it up, see what happens.
Well, Ed, if it's okay, I'll hop in here. To me, you took a leap, a risk, some might say, to put that out into the world.
Yeah.
But clearly your vulnerability, I'm going to say courage as well, to put it out there, it connected. So can you talk about the importance or how that relates to what you're seeing as far as the growth of Dad Tired and what people are relating to as you are raw, as you are vulnerable? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think we have an interesting culture as men. I don't know. Do you guys, either of you watch UFC? Are you UFC fans? Okay.
I have watched UFC, not recently though.
Okay. So I'm a big UFC fan. I've got some friends who fight in UFC and I just, I geek out on it. But there's this guy, he's brand new. He's from the UK and his name's Patty. They call him Patty the Batty. He's just like this crazy guy and he's really goofy. And but he keeps winning. Nobody expects him to win, but he just keeps winning. You would look at him and you'd be like, that dude would never win a fight. And he just keeps winning these fights. But in his last fight, everyone loves him because he's just so goofy. But his last fight, he won. And at the end of his fight, they were interviewing him and they asked him, tell us about the fight and stuff. And he took the time on the mic to say that his friend, one of his best friends, had just committed suicide a couple of days earlier. And he said, he's like, we have this weird culture among men where we just shove things down. Like we just don't talk about anything. And it was really powerful because they literally call him Patty the Batty. It's just like crazy. He's goofy, but he shared a really like insightful, you could YouTube it. It'd be interesting for the guys to, go listen to this little 30-second thing. But I just think that, I think that's why Dad Tired's grown. I think anything, that stuff like this for dads, because we're really good at like going to work and we'll talk about the game, talk about, barbecue. I'm super, like, I got really into Little League World Series this week, like weird stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
we get into like weird stuff. We'll talk about it, but there are very few guys who you can like sit down with and you feel comfortable enough to just share like, dude, I don't feel like I'm doing a really good job with my wife or my kids. I have a good friend who's a Navy SEAL. And he's like, I can crush it at a lot of things. I'm really good at work. And I just can't seem to like connect with my wife on this emotional level, like what guys are talking like that, So it's just, we need it more, but it's really, really rare.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe this question is a nice build off. As Dad Tired grew, what was the greatest need that you saw in dads and in men?
I think I think what I've noticed is how much guys want to have those conversations and they don't know how to get them started with guys around them. And so what we've seen at Dad Tired is if you could just put a bunch of dudes in the same quote unquote room, for us, it's all digital, right? So it's a Facebook group or we have our closed community, but you put them in the same space. And you throw out like a couple intentional questions and you'll watch real community grow. Because I think guys just, again, they really, really want that. And there's very few avenues for them to find that kind of community.
I'm going to ask one quick, how much do you think it's important that somebody has the courage to do like what you did in that group to get things started? I
mean, it's necessary. How else somebody's got to have the guts to be bold and go first. And it's crazy. I see this literally every week working with men. The first dude shares, hey guys, I'm struggling with this. He's got the guts to do it. And then just every guy opens up. Oh, dude, me too. It's like, but somebody's got to go first.
Yeah. I just want to jump in from your perspective. I got a question here. How has the pandemic and post-pandemic impacted fatherhood? Because something from my lens, during the pandemic, all these fatherhood groups started bulging online. Yeah. I heard conversations and things I had never heard before, but I was so happy to hear. What was going on? What did you see about fatherhood in your lens during that time and post-pandemic? Well, we're not fully, but you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah. I think the two things that stuck out, one is we all had more time at home, for better or worse. A lot of guys, they were used to going home or going to work and then coming home. Like they could fragment that time better. Like I'm a dad, I'm at work, switch hats. And the pandemic for a lot of people forced them to be home more than they were before. And so now they were having a harder time figuring out those hats. And I think also for a lot of guys, I had a lot of friends who realized, man, the things I was chasing after at work, I have so many friends who were, their kids would go to school, they'd go to work, they'd come home, you get like 2 hours before you put your kids to bed, you do dinner. It's chaotic, especially if you have young kids, just pure chaos. Dinner time and bedtime, the most chaotic for young kids, right? So it's just chaos. You put them to sleep, you like stay up for a minute to watch Netflix or the news or whatever, and then you fall asleep and you just repeat that cycle. And then a lot of my friends all of a sudden were home more. And they were like, oh man, there's like another world of connecting with my kids that I didn't know about. And what that forced them to do was really start to value, I don't know if I love my work as much as I thought I loved my work. Or maybe I want to be home with my kids more. How do I figure out my lifestyle so that I can connect with my kids on a deeper level? Because just the bedtime routines and nighttime routines is not satisfying. So that's not an answer to anything, but that was just an interesting observation. Is how it kind of shifted priorities for a lot of dudes.
Cool. Drew, go ahead.
Well, I think in that, being at home more, seeing more of the reality, but also saying I want to connect, there are questions of, well, how do I? And you talked about wanting to, having that desire, but not really getting there, and the struggle that you've had people come around you. So, and obviously Dad Tired is there to come alongside and support that. So what have you seen that really helps these struggling dads the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think community is a huge part. That there's some other guys out there. I always say it's easier to find guys to watch a game with you than it is to have guys who will have these kind of conversations with. And so when you put some guys in the same space where they can have these conversations, what you guys are doing to allow a platform for other guys to connect with like-minded men, huge help. I think the biggest thing, man, for any guy, and again, it's hard for me because faith in my relationship with God is so important to me. I kind of view everything through that lens. But for any guy, whether it's like, dude, I don't want anything to do with that, or you find yourself somewhere on the spectrum, any guy, I think the most helpful question you could ask yourself is, what does success look like for me as a man 50 years from now? So if for most of us, if we're a dad, I think the average life expectancy in North America is around the 70s, mid to 70s, somewhere 77 or something like that. Okay, so if we make it to 80s, somewhere around the 80s for us, depending on what your age is, and you look back at your life, how do you measure success? You got to ask yourself that, because it shapes every decision that you're going to make now. It will shape how many times you say yes to your boss at work, shapes the kind of job you want to have, the way you talk to your wife, the way that you decide, am I going to stick with this or not? Like you just have to ask yourself, what am I actually chasing after here? What does success look like for me as a man, as a dad, as a husband when I'm on my deathbed? If I get there, that's best case scenario, by the way. My wife's an oncology nurse. She watches people die. Unfortunately, not everyone. There's some beautiful, amazing, great stories, but too many people lose their life way too early in life, right? And man, those people just aren't saying, I wish I would have grabbed more overtime or taken another vacation. They're saying that they're shifting priorities as a dad, as a husband. And so for you, like the most helpful thing you can do as a dad is to ask yourself, and I don't even know if I'm answering your question, but the most helpful thing I think you can do for a struggling dad is to really ask yourself, what's the game plan here? Where am I actually, what am I chasing after?
It sounds to me like there's the need to be more intentional. I think that's what I'm hearing as you're sharing that, right? You by asking yourself that question, you're being forced to look at, what am I doing today and how is it going to move me closer to where I want to get 50 years down the road or 40 years down the road or whatever. And so you can then be more conscious about the choices you're making, as opposed to maybe allowing life to just carry you along, or you just get stuck in a rut or in a routine, which I think I've also heard dads sort of lament. Like, I don't feel like I'm even in control of my life anymore. I'm just kind of going through the motions, right? So that to me is what I hear in your response of, you got to be more intentional, and helping dads with the tools to become more intentional and aware so they can make those conscious choices.
Yeah. If you don't set the intentionality for your life, other people most definitely will.
Yeah.
Your boss, culture, somebody's going to tell you what you should do with your life. Mm-hmm. And you run that on that hamster wheel, you're going to find yourself exhausted.
Mm.
I
think there's a lot of dads who are there or have been there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm loving what I'm hearing here. And what I share with a lot of men is, building what you said, the average age of a dad or a man is like 77. And I say, you're probably going to live about 80 years. And I tell them, divide your life up into 10-year stints. So you hope that you're better at 10 than you were when you were born, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And also I tell dads and fathers, who are you fighting for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because if you're just fighting for yourself, it's not. So I'm just piggybacking what you said, especially during the pandemic. I saw a lot of fathers realize it's bigger than me.
Yeah.
I'm fighting for my family because I see what they go through every day. I'm getting a real lens of what they're dealing with every day. And I want to fight for that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well said.
So Drew, back to you.
Yeah, well, let's turn the lens maybe back to you, Jerrad, and ask, what has helped you the most as a dad, as your phrase is stumbling through fatherhood?
Yeah, man. A few things. My wife, as I'm stumbling my way forward, my wife being gracious with me. I think going back to what you just described, like finding that I'm part of a bigger story here. I learned in my 20s, man, I was just so focused. And when I say that, I feel like I'm like talking like this wise, mature man. I have no clue what I'm doing still. Like, I have no clue what I'm doing.
Well, I've heard some wisdom. So
yeah,
you got some good ideas.
Well, yeah, but I mean, even just looking back 10 years. So we'll just do that. If you talk about those 10-year things, if I look back the 10 years prior in my life, I was just so selfish, like I was describing earlier, and so, just thinking through like, okay, this is not about me. Like there's a bigger story happening here. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like, if you hit the camera right, like I got gray in my beard, you can start seeing gray in my hair, and I get more wrinkles on my face and bags under my eyes. Like there was a sharp, felt like it happened overnight. I don't know if it was my fourth kid or what, but like it just sharp. All of a sudden I felt like I started to look really old. I didn't just feel like I looked, and I'm like, that I say that kind of tongue in cheek, like being silly, but some of that was like, this is a reminder that my body is dying, quite literally. Like it is showing I'm on my way out. And I mean, your hair turning gray, not to get like weird and sad here, but like your hair turning gray is because that has died quite literally. The cell has died. It's never going to go back. And that, for whatever reason, that reality for me was like, oh, dude, like time is really, really short. And the story is bigger than you. Like pretty soon, my great grandkids are going to be here. And so, you know, what do I want my great grandkids to say about me? Mm-hmm. In my 20s, I was like, what job do I want? How much money are we going to make? What are we going to? Now I'm like, what do I want my great grandkids to say about me? And so that like, I know, again, I feel like I'm not answering your questions directly because it's just, I always think just really big picture, man. Like, I don't know if we talk about death a lot in our family for better or worse, but it's really motivating to me. And I'm just like, man, what helped me is perspective, zoom out. Okay, I lost my job. I quite literally lost my job 7 years ago. Felt like the world's failing. Now it's like, man, there's lots of jobs. You know, you figure it out. You know, am I here with my kids? They're healthy. You know, I'm thankful that they're healthy. I'm still with my wife. We fought through a lot of crap and we're here and we made it. Like you just keep zooming out. Out of everything, the zooming out has helped me the most as a struggling dad.
Yeah. So it sounds to me there's a real healthy dose of finding perspective. That zooming out allows you to do that. The other thing that I thought of as you were sharing is, you know, I'm part of the John Maxwell team. I really love John Maxwell's content, consumed it for a long time. And, you know, one of his foundational things is the 5 levels of leadership, right? The first level is just the position. So let's say in that context of a dad, you know, you become a father, right? And that's the lowest level of influence or leadership. But to get to level 5, that's the legacy piece. And that's where you're replicating or multiplying your influence in the generations that come after you. And that's what I think I heard you talking about is your dose of perspective is how do I move through these levels of influence in my family to get to the point where the legacy is really what's left behind. And I think that you know, so that is an interesting parallel that I was hearing as you were sharing your response to that question.
Yeah, John Maxwell is obviously, he says it way more eloquently than me, and he's got a good structure to it. My motivation was just, I'm going to die soon. I better figure this out. Doesn't quite make as good of a book, you know, but.
That's okay, though. That's okay, though. That's why I leverage and reference John, because I think he does an amazing job.
For sure. Absolutely.
Giving you the practical points of, oh, okay, I get this concept. Now I actually know what to do to get to move towards it.
Yeah, for sure.
Good. It's in my heart to share this, and just building on what's being spoken about here. One of the things I say to dads and fathers is that, especially when I first meet them, you know, I say, you have kids, yeah, and probably they're going to outlive you, yeah, and let's speak to that they have a house, home, condominium, yeah, and I say the first thing you would want as a dad is a picture of you somewhere in that home, and then if there's a picture of you, if someone comes into that home and they ask, who's in that picture? What do you want your child to say?
Yeah. I love that. That's a really great practical way to kind of zoom in on that. What is the goal here? Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Whenever I say that to a dad, most of them like freeze for about 2 minutes because they never had that perspective, but it builds on what you're sharing today about the legacy piece. And it's bigger than me. And it sort of just freeze frames them saying, whoa, I may need to readjust some things. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
That's a great exercise. Yeah. Yeah. And I would say like, do that for any guy listening. So I run a what we call a family leadership program where we take guys through kind of what it looks like to lead your family. But I think those kinds of exercises are really helpful. And I would tell any guy who just heard that, actually write it down. Like write down, what would you want your kids to say? Because that kind of stuff really, it kind of just channels in. It sets north, you know, like true north. Like here's where I'm actually trying to head.
That's your North Star. There's your North Star.
Yeah.
True.
Well, why don't we again ask one of the questions I like to, you know, probe dads of, like, what's your proudest moment as a dad?
my son the other day, we just moved in this new neighborhood, and we moved into a new state, so we didn't know anyone here, and then we just moved in a new neighborhood, and we had been driving by this neighborhood before we moved in, and there were a bunch of kids playing soccer at the park near our house, and he was getting so excited to go play soccer with these kids when we moved in. And so day we move in, I'm unpacking boxes. He runs straight to the park to go play soccer with these boys. And he comes back, and I said, how'd it go? And he said, oh man, they were like really mean to me. I'm like, what? And I'm like, what happened? And he's describing to me all the things that they were saying to him. And he was basically getting made fun of as the new kid. And they were just picking on him like crazy. And I was like surprised that he was saying it so matter of fact. He wasn't like crying or upset or like he was just like, saying it matter of fact. And I'm like, you good, dude? I even checked in on him with him like 3 more times that day. I'm like, hey man, are you okay? And he was like, yeah, no, I'm good. And I went to bed that night thinking, and I've had more conversations with him since then, but I went to bed thinking if that were me as a kid, which happened, I got bullied as a kid from time to time, and it affected me deeply. And I think for me, I didn't go home to a dad that I knew loved me and could tell me, here's who you are, son. Like, who cares what other kids think about you? Here's who you are. You're my son and I love you regardless. And so I looked for identity everywhere in the world. And when I didn't find it in people, it crushed me. And my son came to me, and I think he just knows, man, to his core, dude, dad loves me. Like, dad's proud of me. I'm safe here. And so I don't know if that's the proudest moment, but I do know that just happened this week, And I went to bed like proud, like, man, out of all the things I feel like I'm messing up, I think my son knows to his core he's deeply loved by dad, and he's got a safe place. And man, that covers a lot of mistakes, and I'm happy with it.
Excellent. I have one last conversation piece, and you mentioned it fairly early, and I have, my heart says you'll be willing to speak to it. I'd like you to chat or share with our fathers and those who love them about the importance of getting counseling and or mentorship, because you'd shared part of your journey that, I don't need this, and then that helped you turn. So I don't know if it's in your heart to just share a few moments sharing with dads and those who love them about getting counseling, mentorship.
Yeah, I had a mentor tell me one time, he's like, Jerrad, if you went to the car dealership to get a new car, they would easily sell you on whatever they want you to buy. Even if you feel like you're pretty savvy and you can work out a good deal, you're going in there with a different lens. Like you're looking for all the right things. Show me the way that this might light up, or the sound system. Tell me about the speakers or the cool features in the car. He said, if I went with you, I wouldn't care about any of that stuff. I'd want to know about the engine. I want to pick things apart. Like, I want to see things come from a completely different angle. I'm not emotionally excited about it. I just want to know the nuts and bolts, like the real facts of it. And he told me that analogy when thinking about your own life. We see life through a totally different lens. This is what we would call a blind spot. You want to assume something, you think something of your wife, of your kids, of your boss, of your work, of your circumstances, and you literally can't see outside of that lens. That's the lens that you have. But if you have a good friend around you, or a counselor or a mentor who is coming in there objectively, they're not looking at how cool the speaker system is, or how flashy, how much money you've made at work, or how successful you look on the outside. They're getting underneath the hood. They're looking at the engine, and they're going to speak objectively to you. It's just powerful. We don't have the perspective oftentimes as men and as humans to be self-aware. We need somebody who's going to ask us questions, who's going to look in our blind spot. And if you're serious about, I heard somebody, I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but I heard somebody say this, some of the deepest pain that we will give to our children, or that our children are experiencing, is a direct result of our immaturity, or the pain that we have yet to deal with ourselves. And so if you want to be the best dad you can be, deal with your own immaturities and your own pain first. I butchered the quote, but you get the idea.
Hey, the guy that butchered stuff, it comes out real good. You know that?
Yeah. So man, that would be my advice, man. Yeah. Just find somebody who's going to be your blind spot looker for you and just figure stuff out with you.
Excellent. Drew?
I think that there's so much that we've covered in this conversation. I think at this point, I'd love to have you talk maybe just briefly about Dad Tired, where Dad Tired's going, what you got coming up with Dad Tired, and just how people can get in touch with you just to get more of Jerrad and more of the work that you're doing to help men lead their families well.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. So dadtired.com, that's kind of the hub of everything. We have podcasts and articles, and we do events. We've got a big event coming up this September. But one of the things that we're trying to do is get that community, not just online, but in person. I think there's value of actually guys meeting face to face and rubbing shoulders. So that's kind of the future for us, is figuring out how to get more local groups, how to do annual events and things like that. But yeah, dadtired.com is kind of the hub of all that information.
That's great. I mean, personally, Jerrad, I just want to thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for the influence you've been on my life in some form of a mentorship role. And also just for your time today, sharing with our listeners and sharing with us. I've really enjoyed the conversation. There have been many moments where, for lack of a better word, I got chills because I so connected with your perspective and your experiences, and I could really relate to them. And so I'm hoping that listeners may have some of those moments as well, and have something that they can then take away and apply right away to their life or to their role as dad.
That truly means a lot.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it truly means a lot. Thank you.
Well, and I want to bless you. I'm going to use that word, bless you, for doing heart work, not hard work.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, I appreciate that a ton.
So any final words you have for our family?
Yeah, man. Things I've said a million times in this podcast, probably oversaid it, but figure out what that looks like 70 years from now, when you're 70, when you're 80 years old, man. I had a mentor tell me one time, Jerrad, you're going to have a million job titles, but you're going to die a husband and a father. Go crush it at those things.
Love that.
Nothing else matters.
Good stuff. We will keep in touch. Thank you so much for your time. Blessings to you and your family.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys.
Take care. All right, Drew.
Oh, I got the spotlight. Oh, okay, thanks, Ed.
You want the spotlight?
No, I don't. I don't want the spotlight. That was for Jerrad.
So as always, give me a take home.
Jerrad gave you the exclamation point at the end. Look, 70 years and figure out what you want that to look like. So I don't have to say any more other than it's been an amazing conversation. My nerves went away very quickly, and it's been an honor to be part of this conversation.
Well, remember, excited, not nervous. Okay.
Just being honest, Ed.
Hey, that's all right.
And sharing the truth. So
that's all right. That's all good. That's all good. So another epic conversation on the Dad Central Show, which is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there is positive impact. So we're loving it. We're loving, keep on doing it. Keep on contacting us. And the best ways you can do that, podcast at dadcentral.ca. If you want to listen or watch a show, podcasts. It's a great podcast. Tell people about it. Subscribe, dadcentral.ca/podcast. And if you want some great resources, a lot of them free, from the Dad Central website, dadcentral.ca. Want to thank everyone for either listening or watching to this. And again, more epic conversations with dads around the world to come. Take care, be well, and remember to give yourself grace, and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Bye, folks.